Old soldiers never die, they just fade away. General Douglas MacArthur was one of the greatest and most controversial generals of all time. He served in 2 world wars and in Korea. He has won countless awards, including the Medal of Honor for his prestigious campaign to retake the Philippines. This is the story of the most dangerous man in America, the nickname given to General Douglas MacArthur by none other President Franklin D. Roosevelt. General Douglas MacArthur was born in Little Rock, Arkansas on January 26, 1880. He was literally born into the military, having been born on an army base. His father was a captain at the time of Douglas's birth and had been decorated for his service in the Union Army during the Civil War. Also, his mother's brothers fought for the South during the Civil War. As you can see, the controversy between the two families. General MacArthur grew up in San Antonio, Texas, where he attended West Texas Military Academy. Eventually, he attended West Point in New York. Douglas MacArthur fought in World War I in the Champagne-Marne Offensive. He was promoted to major and put in charge of the Rainbow Division, a National Guard unit composed of soldiers from a number of states. MacArthur also fought in the Battle of St. Mihiel and the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. These were both Allied victories which took part at the end of World War I. After World War I, Douglas MacArthur became the superintendent of West Point between 1919 and 1922. He rose up the ranks until 1930 when he commanded the District of Manila as a temporary general. Douglas MacArthur resumed his permanent rank as Major General and became a military advisor to the government of the Philippines between 1935 and 1941. One of his colleagues, Benjamin Folus, quoted, "MacArthur was the kind of man you either deeply respected or hated." During this time period, MacArthur and President Franklin D. Roosevelt were not the best of friends. When making decisions, MacArthur referred to FDR as that cripple in the White House. MacArthur thought FDR was weak in making major decisions. MacArthur was named commander of the United States Army Forces in the Far East in July 1941. Pearl Harbor was bombed on December 7, 1941. During this time period, MacArthur was stationed in the Philippines. MacArthur realized that he must work with President Franklin D. Roosevelt. MacArthur lacked the supplies, weapons, and soldiers he needed in the Pacific. MacArthur predicted an attack by the Japanese and called for more soldiers in the Pacific. President Roosevelt denied him multiple times, saying that the main priority was fighting Hitler in Europe. The Japanese attacked the Philippines. MacArthur tried to defend the island, but the Japanese forces were too strong. The Japanese invaded and took over the Philippines. MacArthur's unsuccessful defense of the Philippines led to his retreat to Australia. MacArthur, his family, and a select group of advisors retreated to Australia, leaving 70,000 men behind. On April 9, 1942, the Philippines fell to the Japanese. MacArthur pronounced, "I will return." MacArthur told his advisors, "We are not retreating. We are advancing in another direction." The soldiers and civilians had to suffer from the brutality of the Japanese. Many were put into Japanese internment camps and also were forced on the Bataan Death March. The Bataan Death March began on April 9, 1942. It was the forcible transfer by the Imperial Japanese Army of 60,000 to 80,000 Filipino and American prisoners of war after the 3-month Battle of Bataan in the Philippines during World War II. MacArthur planned for 2 years with other advisors his strategy to take back the Philippines. Finally, on October 20, 1944, General MacArthur returned to the Philippines. MacArthur exclaimed, "I have returned." While filming his return, he slipped and fell in the water because it was too deep. He landed on Leyte Island in the Philippines along with other soldiers behind him. Eventually, after many hard-fought battles, MacArthur and the United States Army liberated the Philippines and forced the Japanese out. Finally, the United States bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On September 2nd, 1945, the Japanese surrendered. After the Japanese surrendered, General MacArthur became Supreme Commander of the Allied forces. He remained in Japan until 1950. Later, the North Koreans invaded South Korea. General MacArthur became the designated commander of the United Nations Command in the Far East in July 1950. President Truman sent troops to Korea to help the South Koreans. To counter the strong North Korean forces, General MacArthur decided to land in Incheon behind enemy lines on the North Korean peninsula. This resulted in the Battle of Incheon, which was an amphibious invasion and battle of the Korean War that resulted in a decisive victory and strategic reversal in favor of the United Nations. It involved some 75,000 troops and 261 naval vessels and led to the recapture of the South Korean capital of Seoul 2 weeks later. General MacArthur taunted the Chinese for failing to conquer South Korea. General MacArthur proposed to President Truman to use atomic bombs on Asia. President Truman disagreed with MacArthur because he did not want to start World War III. President Truman met with top advisors and decided that MacArthur had to go. President Truman acted quickly without giving MacArthur the chance to reconsider his views or to resign. The hero of the war in the Pacific against the Japanese was stripped of his command of UN troops in Korea, his command of all U.S. forces in East Asia, and his position as the head of the American occupation of Japan. MacArthur's half-century of military service had ended.
The ambitions of the Kremlin better than for our military forces to be committed to a full-scale war with Red China. It may well be that in spite of our best efforts, the communists may spread the war. But it would be wrong, tragically wrong, for us to take the initiative in extending the war. I've thought long and hard about this question of extending the war in Asia. I've discussed it many times with the ablest military advisors in the country. I believe with all my heart that the course we are following is the best course. A number of events have made it evident that General MacArthur did not agree with that policy. I have therefore considered it essential to relieve General MacArthur so that there would be no doubt or confusion as to the real purpose and aim of our policy.
In MacArthur's farewell speech, he stated, "Age wrinkles the body, quitting wrinkles the soul." When MacArthur returned home, he was a hero to the American people. General Douglas MacArthur even wanted to run as a Republican president when he returned in 1952. Tragically, General Douglas MacArthur died on April 5, 1964 at Walter Reed Medical Center. He died of biliary cirrhosis, which was an autoimmune disease of the liver. President Johnson ordered MacArthur be buried with all the honor a grateful nation can bestow on a departed hero. Many will remember him for his flaws, but he was truly a great leader.